Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where the smell of damp cobblestone meets the gentle rustle of fern fronds behind frosted glass. It's early morning in Victorian London, the kind of morning where your wool coat clings heavy with fog and your boots make a quiet squelch every other step. You're a postman, or as they called you, a letter carrier, and your day is about to begin, though the city seems like it's still asleep under a grey velvet blanket of mist. The lamplighter's glow has just faded from the alleys behind you, and already you're rehearsing house numbers in your head. But more importantly, you're scanning for a different set of clues. The angle of the rosebush by number 14, the chipped urn of ferns at number 28, and the sad little aloe plant in a cracked blue pot that lives on the sill of number 6, and always, ye leans a bit too far to the left. Because, and this is the weird bit, your job isn't just about knowing who lives where. It's about knowing which house smells faintly of mint from the garden box, and which one hides behind 3 layers of creeping ivy so thick even the house cat gets confused. You learn quickly that houseplants are landmarks. That lavender in the window, that's the Jennings family. Spider plants drooping over an iron fence. That's old Mr. Thomas, who refuses to use a doorbell. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your satchel hangs off, one shoulder already unbalanced from the unusually thick bundle for number 42. A widow who writes to her sister in Brighton 5 times a week. Your fingers, numb from the cold, fumble with the latch on her gate, slick with moss. You don't need to see the number. Her garden tells you everything. 2 foxgloves in a red clay pot to the right of the step, and a frost-bitten chrysanthemum on the left. Always. You'd think remembering these details would be impossible, and yet, with every delivery, your mind wraps around the routine like ivy itself. You notice the rhythms, like how ferns seem to lean more dramatically on Mondays, or how people prune when they're in a mood. There was one week in May when every hibiscus in the crescent was cut down to stumps, and not because of frost. No, because Lady Hargrave hosted a garden party and declared them vulgar. Some of your fellow postmen laugh about it. Some take it deadly serious. You're somewhere. In the middle, you don't judge people for their potted preferences, though you do avoid peeking through the windows of those who overwater. And it's not just the plants. It's the smells that go with them. The crushed geranium leaves that somehow stink of lemon soap. The sharp green reek of tomato vines left too long in a hallway. Once, you passed a doorstep so thick with rosemary that your entire route smelled like lamb roast by association. You round a corner into a narrower lane, barely wide enough for a cart, and nod to another postman. He's balancing letters in one, hand and sipping tea from an enamelled mug in the other. He tips it at you and says, "Watch the agave at number 11. It's got ideas." You smile, because he's not wrong. That plant leans like it's been eavesdropping for years and is finally ready to spill the tea. Historians still argue whether Victorian postmen were truly trained to memorize houseplants as delivery aids, or whether it was simply a product of habit born from overexposure. What we do know is that delivery routes could span miles, often walked twice daily, and memorizing door-specific cues, such as which house had a squeaky gate or a squeaky lavender, wasn't just useful, it was necessary. The post at this time was astonishingly fast. In London alone, letters could be exchanged multiple times a day, with deliveries running nearly hourly in some districts. This meant postmen had intimate knowledge of their beats, down to the uneven bricks, down to the widow who replaced her, dying aspidistra every month like clockwork. And let's talk about that. aspidistras, ubiquitous, dark green, emotionally unavailable. Every fourth house seemed to have one lurking in the hall like a potted butler. They were hard to kill and even harder to love, and yet they became a silent icon of domestic respectability. You began to resent them after a while, just a little. You tried not to, but it's hard when they're always watching. One time, early in your rounds, you stumbled across a commotion outside number 19. A young man, barefoot, red-faced, was trying to shove a full-grown rubber plant back through a window, his belt half undone, a newspaper covering something suspicious. You walked past, pretending not to notice, but you heard the woman inside hiss, "Not in the good parlour," before slamming the sash shut. That rubber plant disappeared the next week, replaced with a much smaller fern and an expression of intense denial. You pause at the next stop, not for the mail, but because the house has changed. The ivy that once hung over the knocker has been trimmed. The orchid in the window is gone. And there's a new doormat. Small details, but they tell a story. Mrs. Harris has moved, perhaps, or worse. You slip the letter in with care and move on, one foot after the other. The fog is beginning to lift, revealing rooftops slick with dew and pigeons blinking sleepily from chimney pots. The city awakens slowly, like a pot of weak tea on a cold stove. But you, postman, houseplant memorizer, unintentional gossip sponge, are already deep into the day, guided by geraniums, gossip, and the ghost of the rubber plant. You head toward the final block of your morning loop, where number 47 has a topiary shaped like a rooster, and number 49 pretends not to be impressed. You know every plant on this street like family. Some you like, some you tolerate. All of them help you find your way, and if one morning they changed, if someone painted a pot or pruned too drastically, well, you'd still know. You cross into the next neighborhood just as the first rays of sunlight slant across the uneven cobblestones, illuminating a row of terraced houses that all blur together, at least at first glance. But you, with your postman's eyes, can tell the difference between the house with the leaning holly bush and the one with the perpetually lopsided ficus in a tea tin. And today, your shoulder bag is heavy with letters, most of them inexplicably for number 13, whose owner has recently discovered pen pals in Vienna, Calcutta, and somewhere vaguely referred to as Upper Canada. The real mystery, though, isn't the global correspondence. It's how these letters manage to arrive in the correct slot when the house numbers make no sense and the residents insist on repainting them weekly. That's where the Royal Mail training comes in. Because long before GPS or even reliable street signs, you had a guide. The Training Manual for Letter Carriers, Revised Edition, 1879. It was thorough. Inside were not just maps and instructions. For uniform upkeep, your cap must always sit with pride, but not arrogance. But also a shocking number of diagrams. One page, tucked between proper folding of wet correspondence and etiquette at the door, featured a lovingly detailed sketch of a potted fern, labelled with notes like "common in boarding houses with landladies over 60" and "may obstruct narrow steps, take caution in rain." Another showed a side-by-side comparison of geranium varieties with the unintentionally hilarious caption, "Left, standard. Right, unusually aggressive." You chuckle remembering it. You and the yawl. Other trainees spent a full afternoon one rainy Tuesday learning the difference between a well-tended Norfolk pine and an abandoned one. Apparently, the latter was often a sign of a vacant house, or worse, a letterbox hoarder. One instructor, a wiry man with a moustache shaped like parentheses, insisted that No postman worth his salt should ever confuse a peace lily with a white arum, lest he wish to deliver condolences to a birthday party. You remember wondering how often that actually happened. Still, there was a logic to it. A postman in Victorian London had to know much more than just addresses. Houseplants, oddly enough, became the shorthand for the people inside. Take Mrs. Llewellyn, of number 22, a woman who never spoke above a whisper and whose hallway was dominated by an enormous caladium with veins like lightning. If the plant was in the corner, she was in a good mood. If it was front and center in the window, it meant she'd had a fainting spell and required gentle knocking. At number 40, Mr. Hartley kept only a single potted basil plant. It sat on the windowsill year-round and was somehow always thriving. You found out later he was a retired herbalist and had once accused the bishop's wife of stealing mint cuttings. You'd never seen her visit that street again. Historians still argue whether these detailed manuals were actually standardized or simply shared through oral tradition. Some scholars suggest that local postmasters created their own guides, complete with drawings by artistically inclined clerks. Others believe it was an unspoken, evolving system passed down from one carrier to the next, much like bread starter or terrible nicknames. What's certain is that by the 1880s, postmen were expected to remember more than just delivery routes. You had to know which doorstep creaked, which dog barked at shadows, and which plant arrangement meant do not knock before 11. Botanical cues weren't always easy to interpret. One summer, a newcomer on your route, fresh from the country and too optimistic, kept placing a cactus in his front window, right behind a lace curtain. Within a week, the curtain had shriveled, the cactus had fallen twice, and you'd mistaken his window for a different household 3 separate times. The solution? A small, labelled marigold in a green pot painted with the number 31 in shaky white brushstrokes. You never missed the house again. It wasn't just the plants that served as markers, it was how people treated them. Pristine terracotta pots usually meant house-proud owners who checked their mail daily and yelled at pigeons. Cracked porcelain planters with weeds growing sideways. A warning. Either the house was vacant or something in there had gone. Unconventional. There was one house you remember clearly that changed its entire plant lineup every month. Orchids in February, chrysanthemums in March, lilies in April. One time they tried bonsai, and the entire household descended into chaos when the gardener trimmed too much and was promptly sacked. You never found out why they did it, only that their house became a kind of seasonal clock for you, a visual calendar reminding you which month it was when the sun didn't. The funny part is the public didn't notice, not really. They'd write letters and receive replies, never thinking about how their local letter carrier relied on the presence of a palm frond to tell them where to turn. But you noticed. Always. At the depot, during quiet mornings before the first mail, you and your colleagues would sip weak tea and share notes. Geraniums out at number 19 again. Must be courting season. New aloe at the Holbrook place. Big one, too. Seems serious. I swear, if that couple at 47 get one more ivy plant, it'll start filing taxes. It became your shared language, a leafy shorthand, a kind of unofficial Morse code in mulch and moss. Some even took it a step further. One postman you knew, Barney with a nose like a potato and the gentlest hands imaginable, used to carry around a notebook where he'd sketch particularly nice arrangements. Said it soothed his eyes after all the bad handwriting. You think about Barney sometimes, especially when you pass that one house with the twin hanging baskets and the polished brass bell. He retired years ago, but the fuchsias are still there, blooming defiantly. By midday, the weight of the bag lightens, but the fog in your legs begins to settle in. You've walked past some 70 doorsteps, identified at least 20 varieties of windowsill greenery, and mentally noted which ones are in need of watering. You pass a house that used to have 3 potted ferns, now down to 1. Maybe they've gone away. Or maybe the ferns have finally mutinied. The city is shifting now. Street vendors carting buns, chimney sweeps shouting greetings, and the clatter of hooves in distant lanes. But for you, the day is still in its first rhythm. There are dozens more doorsteps to interpret, dozens more subtle plant messages to decode. You stop at a familiar house with a box hedge trimmed into uneven spheres. A lavender plant leans precariously toward the gutter, and a black cat eyes you from the window ledge like a suspicious librarian. You tap the letter gently into the slot, nod to the cat, and keep moving. The plants may not speak, not in words, but you understand them now. They're part of your map, part of your code, part of your way through the world. Your boots find familiar grooves in the pavement as you turn down a row of narrow mews tucked behind the grander townhouses. The air here always smells faintly of coal smoke and wet roses, though there are barely any roses to be seen, just the occasional stubborn bloom clinging to a wrought iron fence. These houses, unlike the ones on the main roads, rarely display their greenery with pride. Their plants are modest, hanging moss balls, chipped enamel pots with clovers, and the occasional parsley patch creeping from window boxes. But still, you recognize every single one, and that's just as well, because the numbers in this row were painted by someone with either no sense of sequencing or a deep grudge against postal workers. You'd be lost within seconds, if not for your odd, leafy landmarks. Number 6 has that basket of marjoram. Number 8 has an overachieving aloe that leans out like it's desperate for attention. No 10 smells like chamomile and mothballs and is always 3 days behind in collecting their post. This is where the real test of memory begins, not just with the letters in your hand, but with the subtleties of plant position. You spot a maidenhair fern in a windowsill. That's new. It wasn't there 2 days ago. Its pot is a reused sugar tin, faint blue with rust spots. The person living there is likely young, perhaps newly moved in. You make a mental note. Maidenhair fern, possibly student or artist, likely irregular male pattern. Add to memory bank. You'd be surprised how many people can be mapped like this. In fact, it's become something of a game among postmen. One of your colleagues, Jim, started categorizing residents based on their potted plants. Geranium, dependable, cactus, private, ivy, passive-aggressive, lavender, emotionally generous but forgetful, hydrangea, owns more than one cat, possibly unmarried. The system isn't scientific, but it holds up unsettlingly well. Historians still debate whether this plant mapping was genuinely widespread or merely the product of bored postmen with vivid imaginations. There's little written documentation. Most of the stories survive through anecdote, passed down from booted foot to booted foot, like an heirloom that smells faintly of damp peat. One famous tale involves a postman in Bristol who supposedly solved a case of stolen letters by identifying that the thief had replaced the victim's mint plants with nearly identical ones from their own windowsill, never noticing the original mint had a slight purple tinge. The postman, naturally, spotted the swap immediately and tracked the missing mail to its new destination. You're not sure if it's true, but you want it to be. The way people talk about houseplants today, therapeutic, decorative, aesthetic, doesn't quite capture the relationship you've developed. To you, each fern or philodendron is a breadcrumb on a trail. You start to develop instincts. Like when a plant is sick, it often means something's wrong inside the home. Too much yellowing in the leaves? That usually means illness. Soil dry and cracking for days? Probably a death in the family. A sudden burst of colour, say unexpected marigolds or wild poppies. That could be hope or denial. You've seen both. Sometimes a house changes slowly, like a plant curling toward light. You watch the apartment at number 32 go from dead succulents to window boxes full of thyme and mint. You never asked what changed, but one day, a man you'd never seen before opened the door with a polite nod and called you friend. The lavender by the stairs was new and blooming. You keep walking. Today's route is long, but the morning. Sun is strong now and drying your damp sleeves. You pass a tea shop that's yet to open but already smells of cardamom, and you resist the urge to stop. Ahead, you see a familiar hedge shaped like the top of a wedding cake. Over it, the house boasts a balcony festooned with hanging nasturtiums, vibrant orange blossoms that flutter in the breeze like tiny flames. The woman who lives here, Mrs. Kerwin, always decorates seasonally and always has a letter for the editor of the Times, even though she claims to loathe newspapers. Today's letter is no different. Thick envelope, sealed in wax, scented with something vaguely citrus and alarming. You slot it in without a word and note her begonias are drooping. Maybe she's in a mood. Maybe it'll be a particularly scathing letter. Some of the older postmen grumble about the pressure, about how they didn't sign up to be amateur botanists or doorstep psychologists. But you don't mind. There's something soothing about it, something predictable. The world changes, but the houseplants remain, at least until they don't. And that's when you notice something odd. At the end of the block, the small green bush that used to sit beside number 56's steps is gone. The space it once occupied is bare, the soil flat and dry. You pause. That plant's been there since last spring. You remember it vividly because it always had a single broken leaf that curled like a question mark. You knock gently, just once. No answer. A moment later, a young boy appears at the curtain, peeking, then disappearing. The post is delivered, but the mystery remains. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe the plant died, or got moved, or blown over in the wind. But maybe it was a silent way of saying something changed. You've learned to trust the plants. They don't lie. A light breeze picks up as you cross over to the main road. The sun is high now, and the street is busier. Carts rattle by, tailors shout over bolts of fabric, and children dart between doorways like cats. You blend into it all, a moving figure among the ivy and stone. At number 61, the house with the lemon tree and a whiskey barrel, the post slot sticks as always. You wrestle it open, careful not to disturb the nesting sparrow tucked above. A letter drops through, and you whisper an apology to the bird. The lemon tree quivers slightly in the breeze, as if accepting your penance. And on you go. Street after street, fern after fern. You don't need a compass. You don't need a map. You have every houseplant, every windowsill, every flickering leaf filed away in the drawers of your mind. And they never let you down. By now, the hum of the city is at full volume, though to you, it filters through like distant music, steady, repetitive, and strangely calming. Your boots are scuffed. Your fingers are ink-stained from too many envelopes sealed just a bit too tightly. And yet, there's still something meditative in the rhythm of it all. You've turned into a walking metronome, marking time with each step, each knock, each glimpse of familiar foliage. You stop at a corner house with a tiny brick stoop and a sharp left-turning stair. The front is shaded by a pair of climbing roses, pale, yellow ones that droop in a way that always makes them look surprised to still be alive. You grin a little, remembering how, one spring, the resident tried to repaint the railings and ended up slathering half the rose stems with white gloss by mistake. The petals still carry a faint sheen. It's like watching a flower in formal wear. Inside the gate, there's a potted cactus, not the cute kind either. It's tall, spindly, full of menace. You give it a wide berth because 2 years ago, a trainee named Clark tried to lean on it while tying his bootlace and spent the rest of the day pulling needles from his thigh. Nobody ever leaned on it again. And that's just how it goes. Postman life isn't always romantic. Sometimes you deal with real threats, like poorly placed hedgehog ornaments, low-hanging baskets that clock you in the temple, and of course, aggressively placed cacti. But you adapt. You memorize. You create your own survival guide based on the flora of your route. Somewhere around this block, you start to think about the sorting office, the place where your day technically begins, even if it never feels like it. It's an odd space, part workplace, part jungle. The desks are wooden, the windows are fogged, and the walls are usually lined with plants. Not just the personal sort either. Entire planter boxes show up by the windowsills, courtesy of clerks who insist their succulents sort better in morning light. Jim, the same postman with the plant personality theory, has a windowsill chock full of jade plants. Each one has a name: Gerald, Petunia, Clive, and so on. He insists they help him think clearly during peak routing hours. Gerald helps with the northbound piles, he once said seriously. Petunia's more of a rural delivery plant. The sorting office isn't exactly glamorous. It smells like paper, linseed oil, and old tea. And during winter, it's the coldest place in the district, except for one mysterious patch near the rear corner that somehow remains tropical. Nobody questions it anymore. Someone once found a banana plant growing near the fire escape. We all pretended that was normal. Your route assignment each morning is listed on a large blackboard next to the tea urn. It's scrawled in chalk by someone with handwriting that defies description, looping, jagged, occasionally upside down. But you know your route by feel now. Even if they gave you someone else's bundle by accident, you'd notice within minutes. The plants would tell you. You'd glance at a door expecting begonias and see daisies instead, and the alarm bells would go off in your brain. Historians still debate just how much independence Victorian postmen really had when it came to interpreting their routes. Some records suggest it was tightly managed. Others describe it as loosely monitored chaos. But across the board, there's evidence of deep local knowledge. Postal workers who memorize dogs' names, delivery quirks, and yes, even which homes swapped out their potted palms for lavender during allergy season. And that's the funny thing about memory. It doesn't always start with the obvious. You don't remember number 45 because of the nameplate. You remember it because of the philodendron that used to peek out through the curtain like a nosy aunt. You don't recall number 17 because of the red door. You recall it because the hanging fern always had cobwebs, which you silently judged, though never allowed. You take your midday break beneath a fig tree. It's not your fig tree, of course. It belongs to the family who runs the little alley bakery near Fleet Street, but they're kind enough to let postmen perch on the crate behind it and sip their lukewarm tea in peace. The fig tree is odd, mostly leafless in winter, but always clinging to at least one stubborn fig, like it refuses to fully give in to the season. You appreciate that. Around you, fellow posties gather, comparing notes, muttering about jammed slots and unreadable addresses. Someone passes around a paper bag of sugared currants. You take one. They taste vaguely of boot polish, but sweet enough to count as lunch. It's in this circle that the real information gets shared, not the official stuff, the actual intel. "Hey, my number 12 on Cherry Row," someone says. "They've got a new fern, keeps dropping spores everywhere. Looks like rat droppings if you're not paying attention." "Glad I heard that," someone else replies. Was about to accuse the landlord again. A quiet ripple of laughter. Then someone brings up the incident. Everyone leans in, dramatically. Apparently, last week, a postman tried to deliver a package to a house with a decorative archway of morning glories, only to discover the archway had been replaced overnight by a large, thorny rose bush. He didn't notice until it was too late. Now his hat has 3 permanent holes, and he's known as Rosebud. You shake your head. It's a dangerous business, but you also love it, because it's not just about delivering mail. It's about being the quiet witness to 1,000 private routines. The person who sees when the plants are thriving and when they're not. Who notices the tiny shifts, when a plant goes from upright to sagging, when a once bustling porch becomes still. There's comfort in that. Even a kind of peace. After lunch, the route resumes, and with it, the parade of pots. You pass a house you haven't visited in weeks. It had been vacant, but today, there's a new wreath on the door and a small white jasmine plant on the step, its blossoms already unfurling in the afternoon light. A woman you don't recognize opens the door just as you reach for the mail slot. She smiles, surprised to see you already there. "Oh," she says, "the last postman told me you'd always be early. He was right." You nod and gently set the letter in her hand. Behind her, the jasmine sways in a breeze that hasn't quite arrived. And that's the moment you realize your presence, your memory, your rhythm. It becomes part of other people's routines too. You're not just the person who knows the difference between rosemary and Russian sage. You're the constant in a shifting world, the one who sees, quietly, and remembers. By the time you reach the far end of your afternoon circuit, the air has taken on that particular smell London gets when it's about to drizzle, but hasn't quite decided yet. Coal smoke, wet wool, and something faintly metallic. It's not unpleasant, really. Just a soft warning, like the sky clearing its throat. You pause under a crumbling archway leading into Briar Lane, a narrow crescent flanked by tall brick homes with iron balconies and terracotta chimney pots that lean a little. Too much. This block, more than most, is a masterclass in postal intuition. None of the houses have numbers posted visibly anymore. A few tried brass plaques, but soot and weather claimed them years ago. And yet, you never miss a single address. Why? Because of the plants. At number 1, you know it's number 1 because the begonias are always trimmed into perfectly flat hemispheres. There's a white wicker chair with a patch of moss that never goes away. Number 2 has a line of succulents that look like they've been surviving on spite and the occasional splash of gin. Number 3 has 3 matching blue pots, always in a diagonal line, home to a rosemary bush, a sad marjoram, and a mint plant that smells of toothpaste and regret. And so you deliver rosemary, marjoram, regret, letter slot. Rosemary, marjoram, regret, parcel drop. It's a beat, a rhythm, a green-tinged metronome that helps your body move, even when your knees begin to whisper complaints. Today, something is different. Not wrong exactly, just off. The rosemary is gone. You blink, momentarily thrown. The marjoram is still there, same slightly crispy tips. The mint plant, as chaotic as ever. But the rosemary, its pot is empty, not broken, just empty. You knock, no answer. A neighbour pokes her head out from a window 2 houses down and offers, "They're visiting their daughter in Hove. Took the rosemary to make stuffing." You nod. That checks out. Still, it takes a moment to reset the brain. You mark the spot as a temporary deviation. Return to normal on Thursday. You continue on. Victorian London had a funny way of turning postmen into amateur detectives, or herbal therapists, or landscape critics, depending on your outlook. You've seen windowsill herbs that could outlast governments. You've seen pansies used as peace offerings between feuding neighbours. One time, you even delivered a note to number 14 saying, "Tell Miss Rose I saw her daffodils. I understand now. I'm sorry." No name, no return address, just daffodils and regret. You delivered it anyway. You always do. It was around the 1870s that floriography, the language of flowers, became popular in England. Most people used it for romance or intrigue, sending violets for loyalty, basil for hate, marigolds for grief. But postmen saw it play out in real time, in real homes, with real people. They knew that a house's plants could speak long before the residents ever did. There was a period where you swore people were using their window boxes like semaphore flags. An extra pot meant "do not disturb." A toppled plant meant "I'm out, but not far." And, in one unforgettable case, a single sunflower left in a boot beside the door was widely interpreted as "you'll find the key under the mat." Historians still argue whether Victorian flower codes were taken seriously by most people, or were just another social novelty for bored debutantes and romantic poets. But to postmen, especially those on long-term urban routes, there's no debate. You saw the patterns. You relied on them. You remember one stretch during a particularly gloomy autumn. Rain every day. Streets slick with horse muck and fog so thick it felt like walking through someone's bad memory. The only bright spot was the front garden at number 12. A wild mess of nasturtiums, honeysuckle and poppies that refused to die quietly. The woman who lived there was old, older than you thought possible, and her name was something you never quite caught. But every morning, she'd be out there, arranging the flowers just so. When the poppies began to wilt, she'd replace them with pressed ones on sticks, like little paper flags. Her door was always open, her kettle always whistling. She didn't say much, but she always took her letters with both hands, like they were holy things. Then, one day, the flowers were gone. The sticks remained, but the blooms were gone, replaced by a single ivy plant, coiled tightly in a cracked porcelain bowl. You delivered her mail in silence. She never opened the door again. Eventually, someone else moved in, but the ivy stayed for months. Little things like that, the quiet changes, stick with you longer than they should. There are postmen who prefer the bustle of commercial routes, quicker turnover, more coin in the hat at Christmas. But for you, it's always been about these leafy, moody streets, places where time moves slowly, like syrup down cold porcelain. Places where you know that the lilies at number 19 bloom 3 days late, and that the lady at number 22 only waters her herbs when she cries. Some houses keep the same plants for decades. Others rotate them like fashion. But even the rotation has rhythm. No. 47. Does chrysanthemums in spring, marigolds in summer, heather in fall, and nothing in winter but a single lantern hung low, swaying in the wind. It's not a plant, but it's part of the landscape now. You remember to pause when you pass it. And then, of course, there are the clerical houses. Every district had at least one, the homes of former postal clerks who either retired or were relocated, but never quite gave up their habits. You can spot them easily. Precise rows of flower pots labelled with chalkboard tags, mail slots polished daily, hedges trimmed to resemble decimal points. There's one house you pass near the top of Richmond Terrace that's maintained by a retired postmaster named Mr. Dalton. Every plant is positioned with military precision. Basil to the north, thyme to the east, and 2 hardy lemon balms that act as sentries by the garden gate. If a pot is crooked, it gets repositioned before sunset. He once scolded a squirrel for knocking over a sage bush and wrote a strongly worded letter to the local paper about herb-related hooliganism. You admire his commitment. You hope you have half his energy when you reach that stage of life. The drizzle begins, finally. Not heavy, just enough to make your wool collar stick to your neck and your fingertips dampen. You pull your bag tighter, adjust your cap, and keep going. There's still a quarter of your route left, and your memory map of houseplants is ticking away like clockwork. No. 62 should have that leggy geranium with 1 pink bloom. No. 64 should smell like sage and onions by now. No. 66. Yes, the hanging fern that tries to eat your hat every time. You duck slightly, just in case, and slip the post through the slot. It's work, it's wet, it's repetitive. But somehow you wouldn't trade it for anything, because each letter is a quiet note in the symphony of the street. Each plant, a pause between the bars. And you, the one who walks the rhythm home. You press onward through the misty afternoon, feet finding their pace again despite the ache. The soles of your boots have moulded to the stone paths and uneven curbs of your route so completely that you barely notice the cracks anymore. Your mind is occupied, as usual, by greenery, except this stretch is notorious not for its beauty, but for the utter chaos it contains. You've arrived at the Strip, an infamous row of 9 terrace houses where the postman's usual plant-based navigation system starts to fall apart. Because here, every resident seems to be locked in some unspoken competition to own the most plants in the smallest space. And not just houseplants, no. These are full-fledged jungle installations. Number 18 kicks things off. The McAllisters have filled their tiny front yard with so many potted palms and rubber plants that the postbox is practically in camouflage. You once delivered a letter into a ficus by accident. They didn't notice for 3 days. Number 20 is worse. They've got vines crawling up the side of the building, through the cracks in the bricks, and across to their neighbour's window. It's unclear if this is intentional. Either way, that ivy has its own postal code by now, and you've named it Nigel. Number 22 is where it gets personal. You remember it vividly because it's the only house where you've been attacked by a fern. Well, not attacked exactly, but once a sudden gust of wind caused a monstrous Boston fern hanging from the second-floor balcony to swing down and brush your entire face with wet, sopping leaves. You dropped half the post on the pavement and walked away with the look of a man who'd just been kissed by a damp mop. Historians still argue whether these Victorian plant battles were a true social phenomenon or a quirk of isolated urban blocks. Some suggest it was a status thing. More plants equaled more sophistication. Others think it was just a middle-class fad gone mad. Either way, these overgrown households turned postmen into part-time machete wielders, at least metaphorically. There was even a brief postal directive issued in 1874 that encouraged residents to maintain the visual accessibility of their mail receptacles, after several postmen refused to enter hedgerows without additional pay. You'd have demanded hazard pay yourself, if not for the quiet thrill of navigating the madness with nothing but memory and a mild disdain for oversized monstera leaves. Number 24 has an unusual habit of switching plants between their front steps every Thursday. You've stopped questioning it. Sometimes it's lavender and marjoram. Sometimes it's a solitary bonsai on a stool, looking lost. One time it was just 3 pineapples in a crate, staring up at you like confused tourists. You remember knocking just to make sure they were okay. A man with a very serious moustache opened the door and said, "They're on holiday. We're house-sitting." You nodded solemnly. Of course, the pineapples gave it away. He didn't laugh. Sometimes you wonder if the plants are watching you. At number 26, there's a jade plant that's somehow grown sideways. It leans dramatically out of its pot, extending one thick branch over the entryway like it's offering you a handshake. You shake it once, for tradition, then deliver the mail. By the time you reach the end of the strip, your clothes are lightly soaked and you smell faintly of oregano and potting soil. It's oddly comforting. You glance back once before turning the corner, half expecting the plants to wave goodbye. Next is the market lane, a brief detour where deliveries are light and mostly commercial. You pass by apothecaries and button shops, but even here the plants persist. Mrs. Havisham's millinery keeps a row of violets in the window, always violets, always perfect. You suspect she replaces them weekly. Her notes are written in purple, ink, folded into triangles, and sealed with clover stickers. You've never asked why. You don't need to. Further down, the local barber has hung bundles of drying herbs from the awning. Rosemary, sage, and something unidentifiable that smells like regret. You once delivered a love letter there, addressed to the handsomest. Moustache in Spitalfields. The recipient never confessed who it came from, but he kept the envelope in his breast pocket for weeks. You stop for a quick break beneath the overhang of a tailor's shop, where someone's placed a wooden crate of potted rosemary, offering cuttings for free. A note reads, "For those who have lost the scent of home." You don't take any, but you run your fingers lightly across the leaves. The smell is sharp and clean, and for a moment, you remember your grandmother's kitchen, a stew that took all day, rain against tin windows, silence and comfort. Then the moment passes, and the postbag tugs gently at your shoulder again. You're off to the next block now, one of the older ones, with fewer flowers, but more interesting stories. This is where the retired schoolmaster lives, Mr. Chubb, with his cracked spectacles and suspiciously tropical greenhouse behind a row of geraniums. You once asked him why he kept lemon trees in a city famous for its drizzle. "Because I'm an optimist," he replied. You never questioned it again. Even his greenhouse follows the unspoken postal code. Letters go in the rusted milk tin by the gate, under the watchful eye of a camellia bush that hasn't bloomed in years but refuses to die. You suspect the camellia is as stubborn as he is, and then comes the corner house. Number 30. No one has lived there for months, maybe years. The curtains are drawn, the shutters closed, but the window boxes are full, overgrown and lush. Someone's still watering the begonias, trimming the ivy, propping up the peonies when they get too heavy. No one sees them, but you know they're there. You leave the mail gently, as you always do, because some absences are quiet and some plants don't need an audience to grow. You make the sharp left onto Elm Hollow Lane, a curved row with houses that appear to lean slightly inward, like they're whispering secrets across the narrow street. It's quieter here, even with the city just a few blocks away. The sound changes, less clatter, more crows, more wind threading itself through chimney pots. The homes are older here, each with tall front doors and cracked flagstones leading up to steps covered in moss and memory. And at this hour of the afternoon, with the sky brooding gently above, the whole street looks like a Victorian painting that never dried properly, slightly smudged, a little too still. The plants here are subdued, but deeply meaningful. Elm Hollow is known among postmen for its particular brand of gardening. Not decorative, but symbolic. Every pot, every planter seems to carry a story. You've learned to read them like diary entries written in dirt and leaves. At number 3, there's a camellia bush in a wrought iron pot. It blooms late, always. The resident, a woman who once worked at the botanical gardens, claims it's a protest against the seasons. It blooms when it's ready, she told you once, not when the calendar tells it to. You understood that more than you expected. At number 5, someone's planted nothing but moss. A whole stoop covered in various mosses, like a velvet carpet for snails. It's surprisingly elegant, in a fuzzy sort of way. You once knelt down to tie your boot and felt like you were disturbing some kind of sacred carpet. And number 7, that's where the hydrangea incident happened. The hydrangeas had been thriving, tall, pink, vibrant, proud, until a neighbour at number 9 decided to one-up them by installing a trellis of trumpet vines that promptly swallowed the fence between them. The hydrangeas, according to local gossip, took it personally. Over the next month, they drooped, then browned, then withered completely, despite excellent soil and diligent watering. The neighbour swore it wasn't sabotage, but you've never looked at trumpet vines quite the same since. To an outsider, it's just plants. To you, it's a quiet war. Historians still argue whether garden-based rivalries like these were common in Victorian England or simply exaggerated for effect in novels and local papers. Some claim they were rooted in status and social climbing. After all, a thriving garden was a subtle way of saying, I have time, I have money, I have stability. Others insist it was simply neighbourly boredom dressed in leaves. But as someone who walks these streets daily, you know better. You've seen men move a potted rose 6 inches to the left, just to make the sun hit it better than the lavender next door. You've seen a woman break into tears when her dahlia didn't bloom in time for her cousin's visit. You've even seen 2 brothers on opposite sides of the same duplex engage in a silent horticultural standoff over who could grow the tallest foxglove. The post got delayed that day. You were too busy judging height by eye. At number 11, there's a house with a small lemon verbena plant. The smell always catches you off guard. Bright, citrusy, hopeful. You know it's out of place, like someone planted it to remind them of better climates. The woman who lives there wears grey shawls and never speaks above a whisper, but she takes her letters with steady hands and always nods toward the plant like it deserves the credit. Then comes number 13. Most postmen dread number 13, not because of superstition, but because the house has a deeply defensive cat named Albert and a hanging fern that actively sheds on whoever dares approach. The two appear to be in league. You've tried several tactics: slow movement, polite greetings, a sacrificial biscuit once, but nothing deters the ambush. Today is no different. You creep up the steps, listening. The fern rustles ominously in the windless air. You look up. Albert's in position. Window ledge, tail flicking. You deliver the letter swiftly without breathing and back away like a man defusing a bomb. Success. No scratches. No fronds in the collar. You treat yourself to a brief victory glance at the rosebush across the way. One that's always there, always blooming unnaturally well for London. You suspect witchcraft. You're okay with that. And then you reach. Number 15, the final house on Elm Hollow. It's a curious place. No front garden, no visible plants. Nothing on the stoop, nothing in the windows. Just a bare wooden bench and a single copper post box that squeaks no matter how slowly you open it. But once, just once, you saw something strange. A glass jar on the sill, Inside it, a cutting of philodendron, half submerged in water, catching the morning light like it had wandered in from another world. It was gone the next day. No explanation. But you've thought about it ever since. That lonely cutting, that moment of something green where there had been nothing. Maybe it was an accident, or maybe it was a message. You like to think it was the latter. The truth is, as a postman, you've become fluent in a language most people forget exists. You can read a town through its leaves, know when a marriage is going well by the state of a shared herb box, detect loneliness in the dry soil of an unwatered lavender, feel grief in a garden left wild, untended, overgrown not with weeds, but with waiting. You head back toward the main road now, your satchel lighter but your mind heavier, full of scents and impressions and the unspoken stories of 100 homes. You walk past a hedge that's recently been trimmed into the shape of a sleeping dog. You smile. It wasn't there yesterday. Some postmen complain about changes to their route. You welcome them, especially the green ones. The road ahead opens into Thornwick Crescent, a grander avenue lined with double-story homes, wide steps, and a certain type of wealth that tries not to draw attention to itself, but absolutely still wants to be noticed. Here, the houseplants are not companions, they are statements. You slow your pace. This part of the route always requires more diplomacy. You pass number 2 first, known for its excessively pruned hydrangeas, which sit in 4 symmetrical urns like pastel sentinels guarding the front door. Once, you overheard the butler mutter, "Lady Fairfax insists they're cut by moon phase," as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. At number 4, a sprawling home with black and gold railings, a gardener is on his knees, dusting the leaves of a fiddle leaf fig with what appears to be a badger hair shaving brush. You nod respectfully. He nods back, solemn, like 2 soldiers passing on the front line. The house receives 2 letters and a small parcel, franked with exotic stamps from Cairo. The recipient, Lord Hemsley, never answers the door. The maid does, wearing lace gloves. She never makes eye contact. The cat does, though. It always does. You've learned the rhythm of aristocratic gardens. They don't change often, and when they do, the change is rehearsed. Like a scene in a play. One week, there's a new arrangement of calla lilies. The next, a marble pedestal is added. Then, suddenly, an ornamental orange tree appears, fruiting, aggressively in full defiance of the British climate. You appreciate the effort. At number 6, you must navigate the corridor of ferns, dozens of them arranged on iron shelves and stone steps, brushing against your coat as you climb. The house is owned by an aging botanist who reportedly named each plant after a 19th century composer. The Wagner fern is prickly. The Schubert is more forgiving. You reach the door and deliver a single envelope, a hand-addressed note in flowing, cursive. As you turn to leave, you hear the squeak of the door and a voice call out, "Mind the Tchaikovsky. He's been shedding spores again." You nod solemnly. Of course. Historians still wonder how much daily interaction Victorian postmen had with the upper class, given the class barriers of the time. While many suggest that post was handed off to servants, there's growing evidence that postmen like you often became familiar fixtures, even within wealthier districts, especially when their routes spanned decades, as yours has, and here's the thing. They might not say it aloud, but even the aristocrats come to rely on you. You've seen them pacing behind the curtains, waiting. You've watched as they peeked between drapes just to check if that letter has come. Their plants might be arranged by servants, but the worry, the waiting, that's universal. There's one house, number 10, that has always been a mystery. It doesn't stand out. In fact, it does the opposite. Always the same set of tightly clipped boxwoods, a perfectly level row of petunias, a topiary you're fairly sure hasn't grown in 6 years. The post always arrives in duplicates, one envelope in cursive, the other typewritten. No one ever opens the door. A gloved hand simply reaches through the letterbox, retrieves the mail, and disappears. Once you left a note tucked behind the petunia pot, just to see what would happen. Nice garden. The next day, the note was gone. In its place was a small pressed daisy, left neatly in your regular letter stack. No one ever mentioned it again. You've learned not to press. Further down, the houses grow grander. Number 14 has a small indoor greenhouse built into the front vestibule, visible through leaded glass. You slow your step each day to catch a glimpse. Orchids bloom inside, unnaturally bright and humming with a kind of tropical defiance. You once saw a toucan inside. You never mentioned it. By the time you reach number 18, your back aches and your coat has absorbed approximately half the city's humidity. But you don't mind, because number 18 has your favorite doorway on the entire route. It isn't the biggest or the neatest, but it's home to 2 enormous terracotta pots, each overflowing with trailing geraniums, thyme, sage, and lemon balm, all tangled together in cheerful rebellion. It smells like someone still cares. A woman opens the door as you approach, mid-60s, hair pinned with care, flower on her sleeve. "You're late," she says with a grin. "I'm never late." "You," reply, handing her the mail. She inspects the envelope like it might bite her, then glances at the geraniums. You think they're overdoing it. You squint. "They've been worse." She nods. "True." Then closes the door. You exhale, smiling. The truth is, the grand houses are no different from the others. They might have gardeners, might dust. Their begonias with silk cloth might pay someone else to arrange their lavender bouquets by hue, but they still want what everyone wants. Connection. A letter, a reply, a rhythm to their days. And so you keep delivering. Number 20 has a low hedge sculpted into the shape of a horse. You once saw a boy hiding inside it, reading a book about pirates. He waved. You waved back. The house had no mail that day, but you stopped anyway, just to check the hedge was still intact. It was. As you near the end of Thornwick Crescent, the houses begin to space out. More iron gates, more cobblestones, less chatter, but always the plants remain. They peer out from behind gateposts, cling to window bars, hang in defiance from balcony railings. They are the silent witnesses to everything. The greetings, the arguments, the letters that arrive too late, the ones that come just in time. And you, the postman, have become their interpreter, because a house might lie, a person might hide, but a neglected windowsill, it always tells the truth. The light is different now, softer, more golden, diffused through soot and mist like honey through linen. You step onto Bellwether Close, a street that always seems to carry its own hush, no matter the hour. The cobbles here are uneven. The doorways squat and wide, and the gardens, if you can call them that, have a certain charming disrepair. This is where the stories linger. You feel them in the ivy, in the rusted gate latches, in the smell of cracked earth and something faintly sweet, like old apples. You know every garden on this street by heart, not because they're impressive, but because they're alive in a different way. Here, the plants don't perform, they exist. At number 2, The widow Renshaw keeps 3 potted nasturtiums in mismatched ceramic jugs. You once saw her deadheading them in her nightgown while singing softly to herself. She receives a letter every Tuesday from a nephew in York, and every week she greets you with, "Ah, the flowers said you'd be on time." You don't know what she means by that. You never ask. At number 4, a pair of gnarled rosemary bushes flank the front path. They were planted by a couple who separated years ago, but never bothered to uproot them. The house is now rented to a group of students, and the bushes remain, spiky, aromatic, seemingly indifferent to the revolving cast of tenants. Once, you found a student sitting between them, eating beans from a tin and reading a letter from someone named Kit. He looked up and said, "I think the rosemary's on my side." You told him the left one usually wins arguments. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Number 6 is where the strange begonias live. They bloom twice a year, without fail, and only at night. You've never seen them open, but you've seen the aftermath. Petals scattered on the steps like confetti, wet with dew. The woman who lives there insists. They're a sign of good dreams. You're inclined to believe her. No one with that many cats and that much patience could be wrong. And then you come to number 8. You pause, because this is the house where everything once went wrong. It was years ago. You were new. You didn't know the route well. You saw a broken pot on the steps, assumed the resident had moved out, and failed to deliver a letter. A small envelope. No return address. When the complaint came in, you had to explain yourself to the postmaster, then to the resident, a quiet man with a limp and a garden full of white daisies that bloomed even in frost. He didn't say much, just nodded. She didn't get to. "Read it," he said, and closed the door. You never made that mistake again. Now, the daisies are gone, replaced by marigolds and a single potted olive tree. You still pause, every time. It's funny how much the smallest changes stick with you. The way a new herb smells, the way a plant disappears, the way silence fills a house that used to hum. Historians still wonder whether Victorian-era letter carriers truly paid attention to these domestic details, or if modern nostalgia paints them with a romantic brush. But when your entire job is based on noticing, on seeing the difference between usual and just today, how could you not learn to read the details? Not just the addresses, but the spaces between them. Number 10 has no plants. Never has. But there's always a glass of water left out on the ledge beside the door. Some say it's for the birds. Others think it's for a ghost. You stopped asking. The glass is always clean. The letter slot always oiled. You leave the mail and move on. Number 12. Smells of mint and engine grease. The family there repairs clocks. The father trims the peppermint like it's a hedge maze, tiny scissors in hand, muttering about time zones and cuckoo weights. His son once offered you a cup of tea so strong it nearly dissolved the mug. Their garden is a grid, every plant in its place, labelled, catalogued, orderly, predictable, comforting. Then, number 14. This one is always a little late receiving mail, not because it's far, but because you always delay it. You walk a bit slower, linger a bit longer, because the garden at number 14 is something else entirely. It's wild, but not messy. Spiraled paths of thyme and creeping, Jenny lead nowhere in particular. There's an archway made from 2 lemon trees braided together. A rusted watering can overflows with chamomile. You once saw a frog sleeping inside a cracked teacup. You've never met the resident. The letters are always for initials only. But someone waters the garden. Someone trims the lavender. Someone leaves a new blossom on the gate every Sunday. Today, it's a daffodil. A little early in the season. A little yellow miracle. You tuck the envelope beneath it gently, careful not to disturb the scene. As you make your way further down, Bellwether, you begin to notice what isn't there. Number 16's ivy has been clipped back. Number 18's tulips have vanished. Number 20's geraniums look thirsty. All small things, all quiet signs. You file them away in your head. Changes. Maybe temporary, maybe not. But one stands out most. Number 22 used to have a line of ceramic, ducks marching up the garden path. It was silly, cheerful, and one day they were all gone. You didn't think much of it until the following week, when a neighbour asked, "Did you hear? The boy from number 22 passed last Thursday. Fever." You didn't know what to say. You just nodded and remembered the ducks, because in the end, it's never just about the mail. It's about the lives behind the doors and the plants that bear. Silent witness. You take a slow breath and round the corner, ready for the next street, the next hedge, the next blooming clue. Your satchel is lighter now, but your thoughts are not, and you carry them all the same. The rain has finally decided to arrive, not in a downpour, but as a fine misting drizzle that softens the edges of the world. You pull your collar up higher and tilt your cap just slightly forward, a veteran's instinct to keep the wet from sliding down the back of your neck. It doesn't bother you. If anything, it feels right. This kind of weather seems to match the tempo of your route now. Slow, reflective, a little blurred. You cross the narrow bridge at the edge of Pickering Square. Below, the canal stirs quietly, a lazy ribbon of grey reflecting only the barest hints of sky. Ivy creeps along the iron railings, slick with rain. Somewhere down the canal path, a barge's stovepipe puffs a lonely cloud of wood smoke into the air. You pause for a moment, letting it pass through your nose like an old memory. Then, with a hand resting on the gatepost to steady yourself, you head toward the next row of houses. This stretch, Waterman Row, is unlike the others. Quieter, older, built when the city still imagined this part would be grand. Now it's settled into something more modest, a little neglected, and all the more beautiful for it. You begin at number 2, a squat brick cottage with a row of potted herbs in glass jars nailed to the windowsill. Mint, sage, lemon thyme, all labelled in pencil. On fading paper, the post here is never urgent. A pension notice, sometimes a leaflet, once a letter in a trembling hand that simply read, "Still here." You never learned who sent it. Next, number 4. This is the Crocodile House. That's what you and the other postmen call it anyway. There's a low garden wall of crumbling red stone, topped with a series of long, rectangular planters, shaped like reptilian beasts. One looks like a crocodile, another like a lizard. All filled with soil, succulents, and rainwater. One of the reptiles has a ceramic tongue that collects runoff, and it makes a curious gurgling noise when the rain hits it just right. You pass it now and hear the sound again, a sort of burp. You tip your cap. "Morning, Reginald," you say. Reginald is what you've named it. Further along, number 6 has a row of cloches along the walkway, glass domes protecting little seedlings. You remember the day last spring when a cat leapt onto one and shattered it. You offered to help clean up, but the man inside just laughed. "Better it land on the cloche than the cat on me," he said, holding up a scratched arm. She was aiming for the pigeons. Number 8 is a strange one. No garden, no pots, but a tiny vine curls from the keyhole like a green tongue. You once tried to deliver a registered letter there, only to have it returned to the depot with no explanation. The signature line simply read, "Not available in this season." You let it be. Victorian London is full of such oddities. Houses that don't quite behave, residents who fade in and out, plants that seem to have lives of their own. Historians still debate whether some of these stranger delivery cases were the result of local superstitions or just the product of overstimulated postal imagination. But when you walk 12 miles a day with only rain, letters, and your own thoughts for company, you begin to trust the world in subtler ways. And sometimes, the world speaks back. You arrive at number 10, where a single sunflower grows from an old boot. It started as a joke, a misplaced seed probably, but somehow it took, and now it's a permanent fixture. Every season, a new one is planted in the same boot. The postman before you used to photograph it. You've never gone that far, but you always smile when you see it swaying gently, defying both gravity and Victorian expectations. Number 12 houses a woman who believes her spider plant absorbs bad dreams. She places it in the window each morning facing east. If it sags, she takes a nap. If it stands tall, she bakes. You've received shortbread from her 3 times in 2 years. Each time was after a particularly upright plant day. You round the bend and notice something odd. At number 14, the usual box of potted hyacinths is missing. You slow your step. There's a muddy ring where the pot used to sit. No mail today, but you linger, puzzled. The hyacinths were always there. Lavender, pink, sometimes white, always cheerful, always early. You make a mental note. Return tomorrow. Ask gently, because when a regular plant goes missing, it can mean many things, and you've learned to worry just a little. Then, number 16, a row of planters with cuttings labelled by first names. Arthur, Millie, George. A small plaque reads, "In memory." You don't know the story, you never asked, but every day someone comes out and waters them at exactly 3 p.m. You've seen it, rain or shine, 1 cup each, no more, no less. Sometimes silence is the truest tribute. And number 18, well, 18 is your favorite. It's just a small pot of rosemary. Always trimmed, always neat. The resident is a man in his 80s who calls you captain and insists the rosemary plant is his second wife. The first one ran away with a milkman in Surrey, he says every time. But this one never talks back and smells better. You laugh each time, even though you've heard it 24 times. You laugh because he smiles when you do, and the rosemary glows just a little brighter in the mist. You finish the lane just as the drizzle thickens to a soft, persistent rain. The kind that slicks hair and blurs glass, but doesn't soak through. Unless you linger. You check your satchel, it's lighter now. Only a few more stops before you can retreat to the warmth of the sorting room, dry socks, and a terrible cup of tea. But there's still one last delivery on this street. Number 20, you hesitate. This house was once overrun with life. Pots on the steps, window boxes stuffed with verbena and alyssum, hanging baskets that reach toward the pavement like green chandeliers. But now, the steps are bare. The windows dark. The boxes empty. The door paint is peeling in long curls. A single letter today. Cream-colored envelope. Looped cursive on the front. You step up, avoid the loose brick on the second stair. You remember every creak of this porch. You place the envelope carefully in the letterbox, and then, just as you turn, you see it, a single seedling, tucked behind a downspout, barely visible, but there, real, a sprout of green, hope, maybe, or memory, or both. You don't disturb it. You nod once and step away, because sometimes delivering mail is about more than letters. Sometimes it's about witnessing what grows quietly after silence. By now, the rain has eased into something almost musical. Tiny, deliberate droplets tapping the rim of your cap, the buckles on your satchel, the uneven stones beneath your feet. The sort of drizzle that doesn't soak so much as it settles, nestling into seams and creases, softening the city's hard edges. The streets glisten in muted reflection, and your breath curls from your mouth in slow silver spirals. You've made it to the allotments. Officially, they're called the Borough Garden. Plots, rectangles of shared land behind the station, where families plant rows of potatoes, onions and cabbage. But among postmen, they're simply known as the picnic stretch. Because for years now, every letter carrier worth their badge has paused here midday for a sit, a sip and a chat. It's the unofficial break room, complete with hedgerows, gossip, and of course plants that grow in polite rows rather than fussy urns. You pass through the iron gate, hinges groaning in theatrical protest, and make your way to your usual bench, a mossy plank between two raised beds of rhubarb. Jim's already there, as expected, chewing thoughtfully on a slice of cold pie wrapped in wax paper. You nod, remove your cap, and drop heavily beside him. He offers you a slice. You decline. Rhubarb isn't your favourite. Too tart, too blunt. But you accept a sip of his tea, poured from a tin flask that smells faintly of mint and rust. Rained on your geraniums yet? Jim asks, as if that's a standard conversational opener. You nod. Number 9s are clapping with joy. Number 16s have given up entirely, Jim grunts in understanding. Bloody hydrangeas are sulking in my lot. Said hello this morning. Didn't even nod back. You both sit in companionable silence for a while, listening to the rainfall on the shed roof, the distant cries of children let out of school, the low chatter of bees among the pea blossoms. Around you, the allotments buzz quietly with human life. A man inspecting his gooseberry bush like it just insulted him. A woman trying to balance a leak and a squirming toddler on her hip. And someone, possibly the local librarian, speaking in Latin to a tomato plant. It's peaceful here, unhurried. A small reminder that not everything in the city is urgent. Still, duty calls. After a short rest, you shoulder your satchel once more and move toward the cluster of cottages beyond the plots. This area, Henwick End, is known for two things: excellent tea and strange horticultural habits. Number 1 has a garden entirely made of herbs used in medieval cookery. The resident, a man named Gareth, claims it's for authenticity. Authenticity of what? He never says. His post usually consists of thick volumes with titles like Root Rot and Rebellion, An Herbalist's Guide to Anarchy. Number 3 has no visible plants, but always smells like dill. You've never figured that one out. Number 5 is where things get odd. You reach the door and pause, as you always do, to appreciate what can only be described as a plant swap station. 3 small wooden crates sit on the steps, labelled Take One, Leave One, and Mystery Pot. The last is your favourite. Today it contains a tiny ceramic bowl filled with moss and what might be a strawberry. You're not sure. Last week it was a tulip bulb. The week before, a walnut with googly eyes glued on. You deliver the letter, an envelope made of recycled seed catalogue pages, and peek at the Leave One box. Someone's deposited a sprig of lemon balm and a very small note that reads, "Be kind to worms." You smile. The next house is number 7, a tall, lopsided structure with gutters full of soil and moss and daisies growing where pigeons usually squat. The letter slot has to be approached from the side to avoid the slow drip from the eaves, and the path is lined with empty seed packets fluttering in the wind like tiny flags of failed campaigns. And then comes number 9. Oh, number 9. You brace yourself. The resident here, Mrs. Braddock, is a serious gardener. Capital S, capital G. Her front path is lined with trellises. Her stoop is shaded by awnings stuffed with hanging baskets, and her letter slot is obscured by a hedge so dense it has been registered on several ornithological maps as likely nesting habitat. But it's not the plants that challenge you, it's the expectation. Mrs. Braddock has a system. Letters must be delivered precisely at the center of the top panel. Envelopes should be aligned parallel to the door handle. Packages should not touch the marigolds. Once, she filed a formal complaint because her pansy border had been wind-ruffled. During post, you've since perfected the technique. Breathe in, step sideways, slide the letter through using only your index finger and thumb, retreat at a 45-degree angle, and do not make eye contact with the begonias. You execute the move flawlessly. The begonias glare anyway. Victorian gardens, even the small ones, had a rhythm. Historians note that working-class households often devoted more time to them than expected, planting in odd containers, swapping cuttings with neighbors, even turning scraps of yard into miniature jungles. Some say it was about beauty. Others claim it was about control in a world that offered very little. You've come to believe it's both, because a garden can be protest and pride, sanctuary and spectacle. You've seen gardens made of soup cans and copper kettles. You've seen snapdragons stuffed into wheelbarrows. You've seen roses growing up the walls of houses that haven't had heat in a decade. Every plant on your route means something to someone, even if it only means, I'm still here. You leave Henwick End behind just as the sun begins to break through the clouds. The light is low and golden, the kind that sets chimneys aglow and makes rain puddles shimmer like polished brass. Ahead, the final stretch of today's route awaits. The plants will be waiting too, some thirsty, some proud, some barely hanging on, just like their people, and you'll see them. Water them with your attention. Deliver their messages and keep moving. The clouds begin to thin as you make your way down Broadwick Terrace, a wide cobbled lane that gently curves like a question mark. Fitting, considering this street always leaves you with a few. It's a strange mix here. Merchants, retired naval, officers, school teachers, and the occasional mysterious recluse all live within earshot of one another. And despite their differences, they share one curious habit. Each of them, without exception, has at least one houseplant perched at or near their front door. The question is why? It's not a requirement, not in any civic sense. There's no bylaw mandating you keep a geranium on the windowsill or a spider plant dangling from the porch beam. But over the years, the plants have become something of a tradition here. A quiet, leafy language understood only by those who walk this lane regularly. Like you. Number 1 starts strong. A burst of colour in the form of fuchsias spilling from half barrels. The resident, a woman named Miss Dearden, tends them daily at precisely 8:15 a.m. You know this because she's often mid-snip when you arrive. They need discipline, she once said, eyes narrowed. You're inclined to believe her. The fuchsias are terrifyingly healthy. Number 3 is simpler. A single ficus, pale and leggy, in a cracked terracotta pot. It leans dramatically to one side, as if trying to escape its owner's political views. The ficus hasn't moved in years, and neither has the man inside. You suspect neither of them is particularly happy about that. Number 5, however, is where your day starts to brighten. That's the house with the floral chalkboard. It sits just outside the door, nestled between two symmetrical lavender bushes. Each morning, a new flower is drawn in coloured chalk by someone. You still don't know who, and below it, a message. Sometimes a quote, sometimes a question, sometimes just a feeling. Today's flower is a sunflower. The message reads, "Be kind." Everyone you meet is carrying compost. You grin. Whoever they are, they get it. Historians still debate whether Victorian Londoners used plant displays as active communication or mere decoration. But on streets like Broadwick, there's no doubt these pots and planters speak. And if you've been listening as long as you have, they tell stories more clearly than most people do. At number 7, a young couple lives with their 2 cats and an inexplicable number of mint plants. Mint in the windows, mint in the gutter, mint sprouting from cracks in the wall. The husband once told you, "We tried to get rid of it, but it keeps coming back stronger." You think about that a lot. Resilience disguised as something fragrant. Number 9 has a bonsai that's clearly winning a decades-long power struggle with its owner. Each week, it changes shape, ever so slightly. A new curve, a twist, a rebellion. The owner trims, the bonsai adjusts. You've started taking bets in your head. You think the bonsai is going to win. Then there's number 11. This house has no plants. None. But every Friday, someone leaves a single bloom, always different, on the doorstep. No note. No vase. Just flower, stone, silence. You've seen lilies, orchids, roses, even an out-of-season snowdrop. Once, a sprig of heather tied with red thread. You used to wonder who left them. Now you just accept that someone cares. You continue down the terrace, the weight of the postbag a little easier now. The rhythm returns. Walk, deliver, glance, observe. Number 13 is a miniature jungle, and the house cat pretends to be a lion. You've learned to wear gloves for this one. Number 15 boasts a fern that you swear leans toward you in greeting or warning. You haven't decided. Number 17 is notable for a row of potted marigolds arranged in such perfect formation that they look like they're preparing for inspection. The resident is a retired army colonel. You suspect the arrangement is not a coincidence. And then, number 19. Number 19. You love this one, because every week the potted display changes entirely. New colours, new species, sometimes even new containers. You've seen begonias blooming from boots, violets tucked into teacups, and an entire window box built from stacked biscuit tins. One time they used a bird cage, another time an empty violin case. You don't know who lives there. The post is always addressed to initials, but you like to imagine it's a troupe of retired circus performers with a passion for horticulture and disguise. You pause to admire today's display. Maranta leaves fanned out in a soup tureen, accompanied by a tiny sign that reads, "Photosynthesize dramatically." You deliver the letter with reverence. You round the bend and come upon number 21. A quiet cottage with shutters painted sky blue. No plants on the outside, but you know, through the frosted glass, that inside sits a long bench lined with succulents. Every Tuesday, the woman who lives there wipes them with a soft brush, humming a song you've never heard anywhere else. You can't explain it, but it sounds like sunlight feels. The last house on the terrace is number 23. It's a small squat place with a bright red door and an unruly rosemary bush that's taken over the front walk like it owns the deeds. You've brushed against it so many times that the scent follows you through the rest of your deliveries. Some days you resent it. Some days you welcome it. Today, you simply accept it. You post the letter and step back. The rosemary waves in the wind. You wave back. Broadwick Terrace is behind you now. The sky is clearing, but ahead lies one of the oldest parts of your route. A street where the steps are worn smooth by centuries, and the plants aren't just decorative. They're part of the stone. You smile. You adjust your satchel. You continue. Because the route isn't finished. And neither are the stories. You descend the slow, curving slope into Corbell Street, one of the oldest parts of the city and certainly the most peculiar. Here, nothing is even. The houses list slightly, like they're tired of standing straight. The pavement undulates in gentle waves and the air smells like wet brick, chimney smoke, and thyme. Your boots tap out a hollow rhythm on the cobblestones as you pass under an arch of twisted wisteria. The vines are ancient, thick as a man's arm, barked and spiraled, and each spring they burst into fragrant clouds of violet that make you sneeze for weeks. But now, in this in-between season, they simply hang above the path like draped memory. Corbell Street is not marked on most maps. It's too small, too crooked, too stubbornly old, and yet it persists. You don't question it anymore. You just walk it, day after day, guided by the oddest and most wonderful plants on your entire route. Number 1 sets the tone. It's barely a house, more of a narrow wedge of stone between two taller buildings. The front step is home to a single potted daffodil, even in months when daffodils shouldn't exist. The woman who lives there insists it's been the same daffodil since 1854. You've stopped trying to do the math. You simply tip your cap and deliver her weekly postcard from someone who signs only as M. Number 3 is the pot wall. Literally. The entire facade of the house is covered in flower pots. Terracotta, porcelain, tin, even a few carved from wood. Dozens of them. Some hold living things. Some hold soil and mystery. One contains only a single white pebble. Another holds an empty perfume bottle. You once saw a sparrow emerge from one carrying a string. The woman inside waves at you each day through a gap in the pots. She never speaks. You've never seen her face clearly, but she always waves, and you always wave back. Then there's number 5. Number 5 is the one with the mood garden. That's not what they call it officially, but you know, the plants there change weekly, drastically. Once it was cheerful marigolds and bouncing impatiens. Then, without warning, it shifted to all cacti and sharp succulents. Then came the ferns, lush, heavy, draping like sorrow. You begin to track the moods. Today, it's violets, neat rows, purple, precise, just slightly trembling. You knock gently, no one answers. You slide the letter through the slot. You linger, because the violets mean something. And today, you worry. Historians still question how much personal knowledge postmen had of the people on their routes. Was it professional curiosity or unintentional intimacy? Were they simply observant or deeply intertwined with the emotional lives of their districts? From your perspective, there's no question. You learn them by their gardens, by the angle of a watering can left out too long, by the way a plant is pruned, or not. You can tell who's grieving by the unplucked deadheads, who's in love by the sudden arrival of roses, who's holding on by the slow persistence of a plant that's seen too many winters. Number 7 is a garden of only moss, and only one person has ever walked through it, a man with a walking stick and a red scarf. You remember because the moss swallowed the sound of his footsteps. It was the quietest you've ever heard a street. Number 9 keeps a carnivorous plant on the doorstep. It has a name, Maud. You've never gotten too close. Number 11 has a row of old boots along the step, each one a planter. Lavender, rosemary, sage, mint. Boots of different sizes. A growing family, you assume, or perhaps just one person who's been many sizes. And number 13? Number 13 was empty for years. The garden overgrown. The windows blind. Just a single withered geranium on the ledge, clinging on like a memory that refused to fade. Then, 3 months ago, the door was painted blue. 2 months ago, the weeds were trimmed. Last month, a tulip appeared in a teacup. This week, there's a full windowsill of daisies and the unmistakable smell of cinnamon through the cracks. You deliver 3 letters. You don't knock, but you smile. It's the house at number 15, though, that always stays with you. It's quiet, impossibly quiet. No post, usually. No sounds from inside, just a garden of geraniums, the same every day, red, precise, almost military. Until today. Today, one is missing. You stop, kneel slightly, you count them again. 1 pot is overturned. The plant gone. Not broken, just gone. You hesitate. Then, beneath the pot, you see a note, folded, weighted with a stone. No address, just your name. You open it. In simple handwriting, thank you for noticing. Your heart gives a quiet thump, slow and heavy. You replace the stone, tuck the note into your pocket. You step carefully around the remaining geraniums and continue, and down the street. Because Cobbled Street, with all its oddness and tilting angles, has spoken to you. And now somehow, you feel seen. You finish your deliveries in near silence, the soft pat of your boots the only sound, save for the occasional hiss of wind through ivy. At the final house, number 21, you leave 1 letter and pause just for a moment. The garden is full of snowdrops. You didn't expect them, but they are there, white and quiet, blooming like whispers after a long silence. And then you are done. Cobbled Street is behind you, but the stories remain, because they always do. The last stretch of your day leads you into Westbridge Square, a wide, open crescent flanked by neat railings and rows of semi-detached townhouses. The buildings are taller here, painted in soft pastels that have aged into chalky elegance. Some of the doors are bright and freshly lacquered, others peel gently in the corners, like old wallpaper curled with time. You exhale as you step through the stone gateposts. Your boots scrape softly against gravel, and above you, the clouds have thinned to let in a dusky golden light. You are tired, but not the sharp-edged tired of labor. This is the gentle, earned fatigue that wraps around your shoulders like a wool blanket. You are nearing the end. Westbridge is orderly, calm, predictable, and yet it holds one of the greatest mysteries on your entire route. It begins at number 1, as always, a large townhouse with a wraparound porch, painted soft sage. The resident keeps exactly 6 window boxes, 3 with ivy, 3 with rosemary. Always in that arrangement. Every Friday, the rosemary is trimmed. Every Monday, the ivy is watered. You've never seen anyone do it, and yet it always happens. The house receives precisely 1 letter a week, always from abroad, always with no return address. The post slot here is whisper silent. You slide the envelope through and feel a breeze that somehow smells of salt air. You don't question it. Number 3 has the best roses in the city, lavender toned, almost grey in certain lights. The gardener, Mr. Emery, tends them obsessively. He once gave you a cutting, wrapped in a damp scrap of newspaper and tied with twine. They're fussy, he warned, but worth it. You planted it in your own tiny backyard. It died in 6 days. You never told him. Number 5 is the home of a well-known local artist who uses their garden as a palette. Each season, new colours, new patterns, blooms arranged like brushstrokes. This spring, it's white and yellow tulips in perfect spirals. In the centre, a single red carnation stands upright in a blue glass bottle. You can't begin to guess the meaning, but it stops. You each day like a painting in a museum. You admire it in silence, deliver the mail, and move on. Then you reach number 7 and pause. Because this is where it happened. The incident of the walking fern. It was late last autumn when you noticed it first. A delicate fern in a squat ceramic pot, sitting a little off-centre from the steps. The plant had not been there the day before, but more than that. Each day that followed, it moved, slightly, subtly, to the left, then to the right, once halfway up the railing. Then, one morning, you arrived to find it seated squarely in front of the letter slot. You assumed a prank until it happened again and again. Every morning, a new position, always where you least expected. You left a note. Do you move the fern? No reply. You left another. Is it alive? Still nothing. Then, one Thursday, the fern vanished, and in its place, a small envelope. No address, no postage. Just one word written in looping script. Closer. You still don't know what it meant. You look now, half expecting to see the pot again, lounging innocently on a step. But it's gone. Replaced this week with a small bonsai perched on a tiny stool. It appears to be bowing. You nod, respectfully. The mystery remains. Historians might dismiss such stories as fanciful nonsense, urban folklore, whimsical inventions of lonely walkers with too much time to think. But you know better. Sometimes the world nudges you with its oddities, just to remind you that magic hasn't gone out. It's just subtler now. Greener. Leafier. You continue to number 9. This house belongs to a family with 7 children and a garden that reflects it. Wild, boisterous, full of sunflowers in old watering cans, daisies popping up through the bricks, and one very determined climbing vine that's made its way halfway up the lamppost. The children once tried to mail you a chocolate coin wrapped in tinfoil. For postage, they'd written. You kept it. Still in your desk drawer. Number 11 is where the cat lives. Not a cat. The cat. An enormous tabby named Huxley who thinks he owns the crescent. He greets you daily from the middle of the path, stretches out as if daring you to step over him, and sometimes chases your shadow for sport. The plant on this doorstep is a bird of paradise in a cracked copper pot. It's never flowered, but it leans toward you every time you pass. You wonder if it's watching too. Number 13. Unlucky for some, not for you, because this is the one with the postal shelf. Yes, an actual shelf, just beneath the window, marked deliveries here, tea here, secrets here. You've never dared place anything but mail. But once, someone left a biscuit there. Another day, a drawing of a snail. Last Christmas, a feather tied with red ribbon. Today, the shelf is empty, except for a single pine cone. Perfect, dry, balanced like a chess piece. You consider your options. Then quietly, without hesitation, you place today's letter beside it, aligning the edges. It feels right. You are nearing the end of the street now. Number 15 is quiet. The windows dim, the garden still, but the air smells faintly of basil. Someone must still live here, or maybe the basil is looking after itself now. Number 17, the final house on the square, is notable not for its plants, but its absence of them. Nothing grows, not on the steps, not in the garden, not on the sill. The stone is bare, the yard swept, the railings empty. But someone opens the door every afternoon at 4 p.m, checks the empty stoop, then closes it again. Waiting. You hope. One day to deliver something here, anything, a postcard, a note, a seed packet even. But for now, there's nothing. So you pass on and turn the corner. The day is nearly done. Your satchel is light, your coat is heavy, and your mind is full of petals, pots, and small pine cone offerings. The city behind you glows soft with the last light of day. The plants have spoken, the houses have answered, and tomorrow you'll begin again. The last leg of your route winds gently through Holloway Crescent, the kind of street that always smells faintly of soot, rosewater, and something baking 2 houses too far to tell where from. The sun is sinking now, not sharply, but with the slow resignation of someone easing themselves into a hot bath. The sky has gone to parchment and peach, and the chimneys glow at their edges like candle wicks caught in the final flicker. You feel it in your knees, your shoulders, the soft weight. Of the postbag, now more memory than burden. Holloway Crescent isn't long, but it's the kind of street that requires reverence. This is where you finish your day, where the doors are familiar, the plants remember your footsteps, and the windows flicker with the first lamplight of evening. Number 2 is a warm welcome, always has been. 3 pots flank the door, a tall lavender in a chipped ceramic urn, a plump basil in an old soup pot, and a wandering trade scantia with purple tendrils that trail like ribbons on a maypole. The man inside, Mr. Pettiford, opens the door as you approach. Not for the post, but because he's been watching from the curtains. I overwatered the basil again, he says without preamble. You nod, stepping past a puddle on the stone. It's leaning, he adds. You both observe the plant in silence. Finally, you say, it's leaning optimistically. He considers this. Fair enough. He takes his letter with a nod and disappears inside. You cross to number 4, where the front path is lined with chrysanthemums and the faint ticking of a wind chime made from old cutlery. The post here is always the same. Newspapers, bank slips, the occasional dog-eared gardening catalogue. But it's the chrysanthemums you come for. One year, the woman inside arranged them into a heart on her anniversary. The next year, a ring. Last year, just the usual tidy line. Today, they're uncut. Wild. You take it as a good sign. Number 6 is empty. Always has been. The garden is neat but unloved, trimmed out of habit, perhaps by a caretaker or a ghost. There's no post, but you pause anyway, because on the windowsill, as always, is a single white lily in a vase, fresh, changed weekly. You've never seen who does it. You don't need to. Then number 8. And here, as the day exhales its final breath, you arrive at the last stop of the route, the end of the story. The door with the red trim and the hanging basket that overflows. Every season, without fail, with a riot of whatever's in bloom. Today, it's geraniums, deep coral, some leaves yellowing at the edges. You note that quietly, a sign of tired roots or perhaps neglect. You deliver the last letter, slide it gently into the slot. Your hand lingers a moment longer than necessary, not because the task is hard, but because it's over. Because it's the final envelope, the final step, the final rustle of paper exchanged for silence. The hanging basket sways a little in the breeze. It brushes against your shoulder, gently, like a child asking for attention, or like a friend saying goodbye. And now, finally, the day lets go. You take the long way back. Not because you have to, but because you can. Because the city, with all its chatter and soot, has softened now. The streets are quiet. Windows glow like lanterns behind curtains. Doorsteps hum with tea kettles and oil lamps. The plants, ferns, geraniums, roses, ivy, stand watch. You walk. Slowly, your footsteps light, the post bag empty, but your heart full. You pass number 12 again and notice someone has lit a candle in the window. You smell rosemary, faint but present. Somewhere, a dog barks, a door clicks shut, a match is struck. The day has folded itself in, and you were part of it. You, the witness, the carrier, the memory keeper. Tomorrow, there will be more letters, more footsteps, more changing seasons in terracotta and chipped china, more tiny signs of joy, grief, love, forgetfulness, and hope, all blooming quietly on porches and ledges, waiting to be noticed. But for now, let your shoulders drop. Let the rhythm of the day fade. Let the scent of mint and old paper drift away. You are home, and everything, for this moment, is still. The streets are sleeping, the plants are dreaming, and so should you.